Similarly unrealistic is the setting. Um, you ever have a dream where it's like your house, but it's also Yankee Stadium at the same time? There's something of that going on here. It's a there's a I mentioned the dreamlike quality of what's wrong with Mr. Beaumont. It's like a dream. You don't fully understand it. It's like a child looking at something. You don't fully understand it. There is something of that dreaminess in the setting. When Kyle MacLachlan pulls up at the high school to pick up Sandy, the girls are all wearing ankle length dresses. Um, the women in this movie, like the high school girls, are all. This movie's made in 1986. Um, the girls in the movie appear to be in 1950. For starters, our main girl's name is Sandy, which is possibly most famous from the movie Grease, which also features a good girl who is blonde with a ponytail. So there's a lot of Sandy from Grease actually in Sandy in Blue Velvet. Young, naive, happy, peaceful, suburban, whatever. Um, so the girls, it appears to be 1950s. The car Jeffrey's driving appears to be from the 1950s, and it looks brand fucking new. Um, but complicatedly, and there's several other sort of 1950s esque things. The ambulance that picks up Dorothy Valens from Sandy's house appears to be from the 1950s. Um, Complicatedly, though, Jeffrey, you can see he has an earring, which is like a very 1986 thing to be wearing. And there's other things in the movie that suggest it's actually the 80s, like the drugs and the gangsters is very 1980s, kind of the guns and the silencers and the. So you might ask the question, what decade does this movie take place in? And the answer is it doesn't. This is a weird combo space where somehow it's both the 80s, meaning present day for the movie, both the 80s and the 1950s combined in this weird kind of dream world. That dream world is made more complicated by the fact that, and I've mentioned several times about the 1950s and suburbia, the white picket fence, the roses, the smiling, waving fire engine guy, um, and the high school and all of this stuff. I keep saying the 50s, but the 1950s in America was a complicated time. Um, but David Lynch isn't thinking of the 1950s in America. He's thinking of the 1950s in pictures. He's thinking of the 1950s in magazines. He's thinking of the 1950s in movies and the 1950s in books. Because books, like Norman Rockwell was a painter who made these like happy scenes of Americans being happy. And there was all kinds of fucked up things going on in the 50s, and he just didn't paint that. So what Lynch is interested in doing is in looking at he sets it in a kind of, not a real 1950s, but in a 1950 like movie universe, or a 1950 book or magazine of pictures or something, a coffee table book of the happy 1950s. That's the images that he's pulling from when he makes this. And it's why things seem dreamy and unrealistic, because he's not, first of all, it doesn't take place in any particular decade. It appears to be both the 50s and modern day. Weirdly, Sandy in her bedroom has a poster of a movie star named Montgomery Clift, but Montgomery Clift was a movie star in like the 1950s. Like, why would a high school girl from the 1950s have a poster of Montgomery Clift? That's very strange. I don't know how many 30-year-old movie stars you have on the walls of your bedroom when you were a teenager, but like, it's odd. Um, so I lost my train of thought. The setting. Um, so it's not fully realistic, is my point. And one of the places he's getting the setting from is from this book series called The Hardy Boys. The Hardy Boys is a book series for children. It's a children book series from like the 50s, about a kid detectives. It's like these two boys, and they're young boys. Like, they're like, I don't know how old they are. They're fucking 12, 13, 14. And they like solve mysteries. And the Hardy Boys, and they're like detectives, but they're kids. It's like Scooby-Doo, but they go around solving mysteries and shit. And that's what Jeffrey is doing. The joke is that even though Jeffrey is like in college, he's acting like Hardy Boys. Like, I'm gonna solve this crime before the police do, and it'll be like a fun adventure to go on. Also, like Jeffrey, the Hardy Boys would say things like nifty, goofy, neato, And so he talks like them a little bit. And the goofiness of like at the end of the movie, it's such a stupid thing in the movie, but like the well-dressed man disguise, which is just Dennis Hopper in a mustache, like it's the stupidest, most unbelievable disguise. But it's the kind of thing that would make more sense in Scooby Doo, or would make more sense in the Hardy Boys. So David Lynch has set this in a kind of 1950s ish kind of zone. Okay, cool. So now I think we're ready to kind of head into the movie a little bit more, and talk about sort of what's actually going on in the thing. Um, okay. Oh, and there's some odd. And David Lynch also, the other David Lynch thing is he likes to put odd details in his movies. So, for example, when Kyle MacLachlan goes walking, there's like a big guy with a very small dog on a leash wearing sunglasses at night. I have no explanation for that. David Lynch just puts these weird touches, these strange, unusual details sort of in his films. Okay, so let's go through and talk about some stuff in the movie. So one of the crucial things in this movie, um, is that, like Rear Window, it's about a relationship between two people, um, Sandy and Jeffrey, that is only able to be kept up because of the voyeurism, right? Grace Kelly and Jimmy Stewart couldn't have sex in Rear Window, and so they investigated Thorwald for murder. Keith, their neighbor. There's a similar thing going on here with Jeffrey and Sandy, who Sandy has a boyfriend, so she shouldn't even be with Kyle MacLachlan. But they both sort of use the investigation as an excuse to spend time together, and it allows their relationship to continue. If he asked her out for dinner or out on a date, she'd say no because she's dating somebody. But if he asks her to help out with this unusual thing, she's like, oh yeah, I'll help you with that. I was the one that told you about it anyway. Um, and so just like Rear Window, it's about a relationship. And that's really the centerpiece of the movie. It's not a movie about crime and drugs and gangs. And one of the ways you know that is that the final shootout at the end of the movie where they get Frank's gang, it's like a montage. It's like not even taken seriously. They just kind of like, yep, and all those guys, there was a big shootout between the police, you barely see it, and then they move on to the kiss between our main characters, because that's what the movie's about. Um, they're both bored, Sandy and Jeffrey. They both have nothing to do. Um, they say that explicitly, right? That his dad is in the hospital and he's home and he has nothing to do. And she's, how's high school? It's boring. So they're both bored and they're looking for something to do. Crucially, by the way, they're both voyeurs. Um, Jeffrey wants to know what's going on in Dorothy Valence's apartment, so he breaks in and he spies on her. But Sandy says her dad, the police officer, his office is just below hers, and she listens to what he says about crime. So the two of them both enjoy like amateur detective work, and that's a big part of what the Hardy Boys is about, and also Rear Window, amateur detectives. And so that's a big thing in this movie, is part of how it works. They're both like this. Another thing about setting that's really important to talk about, sort of unusual setting stuff. Uh, Jeffrey's Aunt Barbara says he's going to take a walk. She says, "Don't go down Lincoln Street. That's like a bad neighborhood, right?" When you see Lincoln, when he gets to Lincoln Street, first of all, his house looks like his neighborhood. Most of it looks like a happy 1950s suburban neighborhood with white houses and everybody smiling and friendly. Lincoln Street looks like a heroin den in Alphabet City around 1974. Dorothy Valen's apartment looks like an extremely dangerous place. It's pitch black shadows, like at a Night of the Hunter. Ugly, garish colors. She has this sort of green radiators and green vases on a purple carpet. It's incredibly ugly, much like the bathroom in The Shining. Also purple and green, clashing colors, very ugly. It just looks like when he goes from his home to Dorothy Valen's apartment, it's like going from the 1950s to the 1970s. It's a totally different world. And the hilarious thing about this is that it's clearly walking distance from his house. A lot of times in movies, the bad guys are like on another planet, or in Lord of the Rings, they're on the other side of a mountain range, they live on a volcano, and they have their whole evil world over there. It's like the bad guys are over there. In David Lynch land, the bad guys are right around the fucking corner. That good operates in this neighborhood, but evil is just around the corner, walking distance from your house. Is this incredibly fucked up situation in this incredibly fucked up place. Evil's right around the corner in David Lynch. It's under the grass. Your grass looks happy, but if you look too close, there's twitching, roaring bugs underneath. Evil is not something that's far away. It's not something you can get rid of. It's something that's right where you live, right where you are, alongside the good. It's a crucial theme of the movie. I'll see you in the next video.